public meeting, this public hearing is called to order Wednesday, January 24th, 2024 at Brooklyn Community Board 14 District Office. The purpose of this hearing is to invite public comment on zoning text amendment, City of Yes economic development. At the end of this public hearing, the hearing will be closed. The members in the room, the board members in the room who are acting as the committee of the whole for Community Board 14 will ratify the decisions come to during this public hearing. On October 30th, 2023, the Department of City Planning referred out the City of Yes for economic opportunity, citywide zoning text amendment N24001-0ZRY, beginning the public review process. The proposed zoning text amendment intends to implement changes to the city's zoning resolution to support economic growth and resiliency in New York City. The proposed zoning text amendment would apply to all 59 of the city's community districts. The Department of City Planning has referred this application to affected community boards for 60 days. Did we have any public comments come in? No, and I don't see any members from the public here. We'll start by going around the room, introducing ourselves. I am Joanne Brown, Chair of Community Board 14.
David Weissglass, Team Leader in the Brooklyn Office, the Department of City Planning.
Lucia Marcus Regan, Borough Planner, Brooklyn Office, Department of City Planning.
Annie Fiasdi, Brooklyn Office, Department of City Planning, and my portfolio includes Community Board 14.
Carl Henry Cesar, Community Board Member.
Nina Sabgir, CB14.
Dawn Marie Walker, Board Member.
Christopher Bromson, Board Member.
Lee Harmon, Board Member.
Liz Denny's Board Member.
Wichita Board Member.
Barton Prezant, Board Member.
Talisha Sainville, Board Member.
Sean Campbell, District Manager, CB14.
Very good. So what items on the worksheet, let me pull that up. So we've been using the optional worksheet to go through items 1 through 8. So reactivate storefronts, simplify district types, small scale production, loading docks, upper floor commercial use terms, urban agriculture were discussed at the January 3rd public hearing and were ratified at the board at our January general meeting. So tonight we will be starting with number 8, life sciences. If we could see the deck, just in case we need to start referring to it. Maybe we'll just to get ourselves into it, just have you describe life sciences very briefly, and then we'll have a discussion.
Absolutely. Sure. So while we're bringing that up, I'll just give a little bit of a background on kind of the process. Going to keep it very short, don't worry. So as some of you may have seen, and hopefully some of you may have had the opportunity to see, the Department of City Planning was holding a public hearing today, which may or may not still be going on this exact text amendment. That is a public hearing, and that is where, the City Planning Commission is considering verbal testimony, but of course, written testimony, also a big part of this. Perfect, we've got it up. The vote has not yet been scheduled, but we still maintain and have promised and confirmed that any recommendations in really any form that come to the Department of City Planning, or to the City Planning Commission rather, before the end of January, by February 1st, will have time to be fully considered by the City Planning Commission. The vote we don't exactly know yet, but there will be more than enough adequate time for anything that comes in at that point. I understand you all have been using the worksheet. That's something that was kind of requested for a bit of a simplification. Do want to emphasize though, you are not limited by that worksheet. You are not bound by that worksheet. You can submit however you want. You could submit long essays, documents, colored pencil drawings, whatever makes whatever gets the point across. If you want to, go step by step, that's great. If you have larger comments, that's also great. The more comments you have, the more that we can plan, both in considering this text amendment, but also in the future. I think that's really important. CB14 is one of my favorite boards to work with because you have a lot of comments and it really helps us understand what the community needs, right? after this process is done, planning will not end, right? So whatever you have here for your comments here will still help us plan for the longer term future.
Okay, I appreciate that. So we're on proposal 8, life sciences. So if you want to, talk about this with us for a minute or two, and then we can ask our questions.
Sure. Right, so I mean, try to go over it a little bit here, in terms of, what currently is the issue and what we'd like to do to try to alleviate it to a certain extent, right? So right now we have a lot of outdated terms, right? We talked about that the last time about a lot of our terminology, and that still holds true when it comes to life sciences, right? Life sciences and technology have advanced a lot in the last 60 years, to say the least. Right, so there's a lot of uncertainty about where safe and modern research, R&D can actually occur, right? Our hospitals and our laboratories really depend on these and depend on having the space available to keep New York at the forefront of research and development for health and safety, right? And so this ambiguity makes it difficult, right? There's special permits now that allow commercial labs that can only be used in certain locations and in certain situations that are a little bit outdated, right? So what we want to do is basically twofold, is we want to clarify a lot of these definitions, right? So this is similar, like you said last time, there are overlaps, right? This is similar to a lot of previous things where we want to clarify definitions, bring them into the 21st century to give life sciences businesses a little bit more clarity about where they can locate. Obviously, they will need to meet all environmental standards that protect neighbors. Those are regulated by folks much smarter than we are at some of those health and safety protocol, and also expand where some of these facilities can locate, particularly on community facility campuses. Those will require a CPC special permit, right? And that's important to note because that is still a discretionary process, meaning the community board will still have their opportunity to weigh in those situations. Why do we say campuses? Well, those are where you tend to see larger hospitals, right? You want to have that research done closer to the hospitals where they're actually using a lot of the outcomes of that research, or those larger laboratory facilities that are already existing, complying by those protocols. Right now, even to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no way for that to occur, even with a discretionary process. And that makes it difficult, right? And so we want to allow, with a discretionary process, that to occur.
Thank you. I'm looking at my notes, and this board really didn't have any comments previously with regard to this one. So we can start our discussion now. We'll start with Barden.
In reviewing the applicability diagrams, I believe I saw this as 0 possibility for CD14. 8 appears not in any of the charts.
That may be the case. We're
Okay.
going over.
No, not to say that we're not to take a stance, but just to confirm, it looks like this cannot take place in CD14.
It's in all commercial districts?
It's in,
All
yeah,
commercial districts.
All
it
commercial
could be in
districts?
commercial
But
district.
what number 8 didn't show in any of those diagrams.
Yeah, that's-
So I think we've got it maybe on different slides.
Yeah,
Okay,
I can
maybe
go-
I'm wrong. Okay,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I went through each one and looked for the numbers, and I guess
No, I understand.
I might be totally
we
wrong.
are gonna try to update this so a computer up here can do this, but in the meantime,
I
thank
don't want to
you.
take your,
No, please,
Thunder.
go for it. What just?
I know we got the applicable and receivers.
There it is.
Proposal, yeah. Oh, I see. So these are the different proposals, right? When I start here. So if you look on the left side, this table,
Mhm.
those proposals show it's there. On the right side, those are just showing districts,
Right,
right?
but if you go up the entire left side there, I don't think I saw 8 in any of them. Yeah.
Right,
Right.
right. And so that very well may be the case.
Oh, so I am right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you.
checking.
So again, Joanne, you can run the meeting as you see fit. We wanted to present everything citywide. If you'd like to,
Well, it's up to the,
gloss over.
it's up to this board if they want to make any general comments about it. If we, there's we have another proposal that is not really applicable. So we'll make a decision at the time whether or not we might want to make a comment. Pina.
Oh, so then I guess with that having been pointed out, makes my original question moot. But does that mean that if we don't make a decision that they could then just decide that now they can do whatever in CB14 pertinent to number 8?
No, they can't do it at all. And if this passes, then that could be done if we had the appropriate district to offer, as long as they passed through a CPC discretionary act.
Okay,
We
so
would-
if
We
this,
would be able to weigh in on it.
so in other words, if this were voted in as a yes overall by whoever the powers
And
that be
then,
in the
and then we
city,
do have a
then-
hospital.
then they would have to come to us specifically if they wanted to implement this in our.
Yeah, we're gonna open up a lab on Avenue O between East 26 and Bedford, next to the hospital.
That would
And
be,
then we would,
right, that would be CPC anyway,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
but since Avenue O is not a C district, then they can't do it.
So how do we want to proceed with items that aren't applicable to us this time? No comment?
And sorry, at this time is also pertinent, right? You could in the future, if, you know, and that would be another.
We have a rezoning from the hospital.
With the C4, C5, or C6 zone, then this would become applicable. But that would be a two-step process. Someone would need to rezone, which would be a full ULURP, and then someone would need to apply through the CPC special permit, which would be another discretionary process.
So how do we want to approach this item that is not applicable at this time? Yeah, pardon.
Oh, I guess what I was just gonna say is, maybe we should reserve more conversation and analysis for the ones, like 16 that affect residential districts.
Right.
And, maybe, just make a comment or two, but maybe not delve into this one as much as like that one.
So, do we want to say in our response for this matter, we neither approve nor disapprove as it is not applicable to our district at this time?
That sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds
Go
great.
on to the next one. Item 9. That is nightlife. So if you want to take a minute or two to introduce nightlife to us.
Surely. So there's a couple things going on here, right? One of the things that you may have or may not be aware of is that there were cabaret laws in effect in New York City for many, many years. Those have been repealed by city council, I think. Yeah, those were repealed by the city council. We found them to be highly discriminatory, among being problematic in many other ways. So that's one of the things going on. And we wanted to make sure that zoning actually kept updated with the actual policy set forth by the city council, so there aren't any kind of contradictions that are confusing. Another thing is that even with that, within the Department of City Planning, within the zoning resolution, there are very confusing and weird rules around what is actually allowed, right? So these confusing rules lead to a couple things. A, if I'm a business, I don't know what I'm doing, right? I don't know what's allowed in my business sometimes. There are a lot of outdated things where, such as you can have a restaurant up to a certain place, but you don't allow dancing, right? So I can sit in a restaurant, that's fine, but as soon as I do this, illegal. There are other situations where you can have, for instance, live music to a certain extent, obviously kept under certain decibel levels and, reasonable things like that. But you can't actually post the showtime for it, right? You can just have it kind of incidental, maybe. And so there's a lot of these little nitty gritty things that are very hard to enforce and understand. And we found that in a lot of our districts, other districts that do allow some more nightlife to a reasonable extent, we found a way, so we think, within this text, to still allow a little bit more certainty for businesses, expand a little bit more opportunity for these businesses, while still protecting the residents nearby, right? So what is the proposal? We want to clarify a lot of the regulations, right? And a lot of this is based on capacity, right? A lot of the capacity limitations already exist today, right? They already exist today. And so we want to clarify within which capacity you can do certain types of things, right? So we want to allow 200-person capacity, which we find to be a typical like storefront restaurant. Typically can have a capacity of up to 200 or so on businesses in C1 through C3 districts. C3 districts are not really applicable here. Those are waterfront districts, but the C1 and C2 are the overlays, right? So we talked about that last time, residential district with commercial overlays, right? They would be allowed to have 200-person capacities. Anything larger than that would only be allowed in the C4 through C8 districts, of which you currently do not have any, or in the M1 through M3 districts, those manufacturing districts of which you only have a few. nightlife venues are still going to be regulated by everything outside the Department of City Planning. Right? State Liquor Authority, still going to have high regulations, and those liquor authority licenses still go through the convenience store, it's my understanding. Right? DOB, FDNY, the NYPD, all the regulations required for nightlife are still going to remain as they are. What we're going to do is clarify just the businesses, right, and what's allowed where. We're happy to go into more detail because there is a lot more detail there, but I'll kind of leave it to you to.
We'll get the detail out in the questioning. So I'll take some questions. Let me just read some comments from the discussions that have taken place previously that I have in my notes. Noise complaints would be addressed with DEP, NYPD, MEND. There's a note from the district manager, the ability to get satisfaction on those noise complaints is pretty poor. The district office receives frequent complaints about bars, restaurants, and party venues now. Adding dancing, live acts, and other uses may not go well without a better enforcement mechanism.
Yeah.
And I also just want to bring up something that's will change sort of the landscape of enforcement with these agencies. We previously, enforcement was done through what's called March, which is multi-agency response to community hotspots. That program is no longer in effect. There is a new program called CURE, coordinating a united resolution with establishments. What would happen with March is during the operation of the business, these agencies would, in collaboration, go into the business and do an inspection. And business owners feel this is quite invasive during the time that they are operating the business, but the conditions of the business only happen when the business is operating, especially with nightlife. Now, in the CURE process is going to be a lot of NYPD calling on the phone saying, got some complaints, can we do something about it? So it's a lot less invasive process and probably a lot less effective. So we have to look at this landscape now under this current condition, no longer looking at it in a interagency response where they go in and they investigate while it's happening to a more like step back approach. Okay. Start with questions and during this discussion. All right.
So the capacity is being increased to 200, the allowance for C1 to C3, what was it previously?
So the 200-person capacity is actually the size currently allowed for eating and drinking establishment with live music and posted show times, but they're not allowed to dance. So that's one thing we're changing, right?
But it's not actually the number, it's not the capacity itself. That stays the same.
Yes.
Okay.
So the capacity for those sorts of establishments,
Okay.
right, is going to remain. We're simply going to allow people to dance, which, as we know, exists a little bit already.
Okay.
And so we'll bring it into compliance.
And if I may as well, this proposal is with the intention of clarifying a lot of what's unclear in terms of nightlife. And also in response to the cabaret law as well, in hopes of, this is not meant to encourage nightlife to expand or grow. This is meant to reflect the change in legislation, but also clarify in order to hopefully better regulate some of these uses as well. Because a lot of the like dancing, for example, being a use that's currently not within currently restricted in uses, but the noise that is often generated from the establishments, including like music and other, that is actually already exists. And so with these regulations, we're hoping to be able to regulate that and also be able to regulate.
Carl.
Sure, no problem. So, two things. I think there's a slide in this deck where you had some like figurines. I thought that like showed the
Yeah, that had some.
yes, this one,
Yes.
yes, so that one versus the other one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then I apologize because this thought exercise may be completely wrong, but I'm thinking about this in the context of one of those earlier proposals about having commercial, I guess, in a residential above. And so I'm wondering, in a universe where that was also approved, would this mean that I could have a multi-residential building where one of these establishments was, I guess, above ground floor, and then as long as the capacity was no greater than 200, I could have, let's say, floors 3 through 6 be residential, and floor 2 could be an establishment that had food and dancing,
Or the roof.
or on the roof. Could that be feasible?
Yes.
Okay.
This is, basically, this is, I think, clarifying, this is the current situation, by the way, so for everyone to see. I think if we go one more slide, Eddie? Yes, so this will be proposed, so we can kind of go back and forth, so, right, so bar and restaurant, you're allowed to have live music, that happens right now, right, with the 200-person capacity, or actually without it. If you have a actual, ticketed musical entertainment, a bar, a restaurant, something like that, where people have to purchase a ticket, there's like a posted show time, you can have that up to 200 people, but you can't enjoy it physically. If you want to have some incidental dancing, it depends on the specifics of the situation, which are really unclear. We can go into all those details. It depends on the zone, and that's kind of one of the things that we want to clarify. And then a bar or restaurant just with dancing that is less incidental, right? Where there's like a dance floor, that's just, not permitted. Next one, first two do not change, right? You still have the ticketed show times at a bar or restaurant with a 200-person capacity. That's totally fine, still going to be the case, no change. This will clarify that incidental dancing is permitted in any business type. And so that goes to your, if businesses are then permitted on upper floors, which if that proposal does pass, it will be, then yes, this will be, permitted.
Okay.
I'd just like to also add that completely also understanding the concerns of potentially having a noisy restaurant on the same floor as residential baked into the proposal. That's something that, great question, something we also thought about. Baked into the proposal, there is that required 15-foot separation of between a use that could produce noise like a restaurant and any residential units on the same floor. And that would be 15-foot horizontally and vertically. So they would have to have another floor in between anything that was above or below.
Speaking to the rooftop,
Yes.
right, yeah. Meeting, sorry. I'm
Um,
calling on people, but it's.
District Manager Campbell, we have 4 minutes left to discuss this, so
So the focus is on dancing right now as we're discussing it, but there's also in this part of the proposal, other shows, comedy shows. Yeah. So my question would be that would then, you'd have a crowd coming in at a certain time, it'd be ticketed, you'd come in at a certain time, they would all come in at the same time, they would all leave at the same time, the next act would come in at the same time. So that's another one of my concerns, like in a restaurant or even where there's dancing, people are coming and going. But I'm just thinking about like at the King's Theater where it's like a show time, you get so many people in and out at once. That's another one of my concerns, and there's nothing that would mitigate, that would just be a part of, that would be an as of right use on any block where, any commercial block, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, just-
that is accurate. Again, we think one help with mitigation there is the 200-person capacity, of which Kingston
Yeah,
is.
200 people in and out at one time is a lot.
Understood, it's not nothing,
Yeah.
certainly.
next question.
Sorry.
I appreciate the goal to clarify this and to make sure that, it can't be enforced in, say, like a discriminatory manner, as many of our many rules in the city often are. And I just was wondering, I just wanted to clarify too, it sounds to me like by and large, whenever I've been to kind of like a dancing venue or something, the noise primarily, or outside it or whatever, feels primarily from the loud music and the live music, which is already permitted under my understanding, and not so much from the dancing itself. And I appreciate the 15-foot space and so forth that would be placed there. So I just wanted to know if there was any like additional data or anything, if my conception of this is wrong. Like if that is not actually the case and somehow feet are much louder than I expect them to be or something.
But it could also be the incentive to make the music louder because then dancing is permissible. So not necessarily body is moving, but the incentive to make the music louder to encourage dancing. That's,
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, I want to get to another board member's question and then maybe Greg Alvarez.
Yeah, well, just building on that. So just trying to figure out what the purpose of dancing was originally. I mean, to me, it seems that when you add that dancing component, it creates a focus on the music necessarily. You know, there's a difference between, say, you know, a jazz trio at brunch versus having a band there and the band is there and this is the focus and that dancing creates maybe a different scale. Is that what that was the differential or at least the understanding of why they use dancing as sort of the measure or we don't know?
Was that a blue long holder or holder?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I don't know about 1961, to say the least, and that's one of them, to be quite frank. But I mean, going back to the previous answer, I will say that that was our experience as well. And, you know, that's a valid point, right? This may be a focus on the music, right? Or I can, both of your points, right? Now there's dancing, there's a focus on the music. You may incentivize you to turn it up a little bit, but nothing actually changes there, right? The decibel levels that are required and mitigated, like those will remain exactly as they are. Your point about enforcement, totally legitimate, right? I'm not gonna pretend that enforcement is perfect and that may be the case, but what zoning cannot do and never actually did, even in 1961, was regulate decibel level. Because I can also produce a very high decibel level in my apartment. I actually have. I play loud music. So
About
that's an area.
Um,
You said it, not me.
So, so our time is up really to discuss this item. So I want to sort of get at how we're feeling, what our concerns are. If we want to support or do not support, if we have conditions, if we've come up with some conditions on this item. Yes,
Well, I would say my condition would definitely be that there has to be a specified max decibel level.
it's not a zoning issue.
That would remain a police issue.
Yeah.
And that decibel level would not change.
That being said, like, we can also include it in recommendations, if that's something that you'd
Right,
like to see.
that's-
Yeah, I mean, we'll say many times that, you know, but I don't know if you saw the public hearing at the borough president's office, but there was you did. And the retired lieutenant from the FPNY who testified that you haven't gone to them or to talk about any of this. DCP has not gone to, so, you know, again, we've said this many, many times that we feel DCP is siloed and that you don't get enough interagency comments on this work before it's brought to community boards, and we're the ones that have to pick it apart for worst case scenario. So, you know, what we're seeing here is that even the problems that we have right now are not being addressed. So why are we going to invite more problems? I mean, that's been the sentiment I'm sure that you've heard all day today in the public testimony too. Anyway, getting off my soapbox. So, yeah.
I have to admit, I'm pro nightlife, as some of you may already know. But I'm afraid the view I'm gonna have to take for most of these is we are a predominantly residential district, and few people are being asked to make a decision that, at least in our district, is going to affect tens of thousands of people. And so I'm just sort of viewing things through the lens of what is the scale of the possible ramifications of any of these changes. And as I said before, I mean, the number of changes you're making just in even this one component of City of Yes are staggering. I mean, in past years, I remember when DCP would come with something, it would be like changing the height of a fence. And we'd have a half hour to an hour discussion, you know, in a C1 district or something. So I'm afraid I'm not feeling capable of really wrapping my head around what the ramifications would be. And that when it comes to something that disproportionately affects residential citizens, I'm just gonna have to say no.
So all those who support number 9, raise your hands and then we can talk about conditions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those who do not support. Okay, so 7, so support carries. Any conditions that are zoning related?
Maybe there can be some kind of condition about maybe in terms of I don't know if it's within our jurisdiction, but ties of, um, sort of louder music or,
I
times for dancing, like
think
maybe.
that would be more code.
Yeah.
I think the things that we can talk about are, think about if this zoning text amendment passes, then a condition could be that this would not exist in a building that's mixed commercial and residential. We can say things like that.
Yeah, which might
Um,
be good, for those buildings that do have the mix. Because I don't think that there's any other way to really control,
Okay.
Can I try to summarize that?
Well, I want to see if that's a condition that people want to put on this first. All those in favor of this condition, the condition would be that this nightlife change would not occur in a mixed building where the way it is proposed in this zoning text amendment, where you have residential, commercial above residential, which I think strongly opposed it.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah,
Is there a different entrance and exit?
yeah. In the proposal, if it is a building that is mixed, there's a separate elevator and entrance for the commercial units and the residential.
And also there's the 15 feet, right? So that's a huge buffer.
Well, maybe for noise, but not for vibration, perhaps. So the condition that is, yes,
Question, can that include, I don't know, soundproof, but like having some kind, the way the business is made, for example, to kind of like counteract the noise or even the vibration, can that be one of the things that they can regulate?
that's not a zoning, it's not a zoning request.
Not zoning, but again, want to reiterate, this document's going to exist in perpetuity, so.
I mean, it's a comment that we'll put in, but it's not a condition of the zoning text amendment because it's not a requirement. Are we having discussion about the
Yes.
condition? Yeah, Greg?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that, I mean, currently, how is noise regulated? Does the city have a specific noise code that's beyond it?
Mhm.
I mean, can we put a condition then in that says, okay, let's jump over that silo and say, well, this isn't specific to the text amendment, but let's consider amendments to the noise code to be mindful of this change that we're making to see if maybe the tolerances maybe should be reduced in those sorts of situations, and you can adjust it because it's usually based on decibel levels. Something where if we are going to accept these sorts of uses in these situations, that maybe we can adjust the noise code so that it can address those issues when they come up, and it makes it easier from an enforcement perspective to regulate as well.
I mean, it could be in the narrative, but that would be like a city council action.
Right.
Last comment, because we really.
I was just gonna note that a lot of the nightlife venues that are already really loud and thriving in New York are in Manhattan in mixed use buildings, and they seem to solve this problem okay, and we should be looking towards that as potentially a model as we need to figure out ways to get more housing, but also to help businesses thrive.
That's,
I would oppose this.
that's not my experience in
only-
this district.
I only see this.
There's a lot of mixed use in this district.
I mean, I'm not gonna have a debate about it because I don't live in a district and I don't talk to the district managers in Manhattan and know what their complaints are. I'm sure you can talk to that. Okay, so the condition that, based on the zoning text amendment and how, mixed use, commercial and residential will be commingled above, residential floors, is that this should not be applicable in that case. That would be a condition. I hope I verbalized that well for you. Yes? Okay. All those in favor of that condition and with support? That's 9. All those opposed? 2, 3. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to amusement. If you want to bring up the amusement slide, I appreciate it. Cool.
Again, I'll try to keep these shorter, sorry.
Yeah, just 1 to 2 minutes.
Of course. So this is kind of similar to actually the entertainment in a separate way, in that amusements look very different in 1961 than they do today, right? And we have a couple of our examples here. These are defined in a way that don't really make sense in the 21st century. And so people who actually want to engage in some of these newer amusements, right, that you kind of see on the right side, I don't know, a trampoline park or something like that, a ping pong place, whatever, they got to go to industrial areas, right, to engage in those because they were kind of built for the Coney Island situation a lot of times. Virtual reality, all that kind of stuff. They're prohibited in many of our commercial districts, right? And so this is again a situation where the proposal differentiates between C1 and C2 districts, of which you have many, and the C4 through C7s, of which you currently have none, right? So I'll focus on the C1, C2s. We want to, first of all, codify amusement and recreation facilities, and then allow the uses indoors for spaces up to 10,000 square feet in the commercial overlays, right? So I think some of the uses that you see here, the virtual reality and arcade, something like that, would be permitted up to 10,000 square feet in these areas, right? C4 through C7, they'd be allowed indoors without that square footage limitation, but you have none of those currently. And they'd be allowed indoors or outdoors without limitation in C8, M1s, and M2s and M3s, which you have a couple. Businesses in any of the commercial districts could apply to allow an outdoor activities through a BSA special permit process. So an outdoor, that could be like mini golf, kind of something like that. That would need to be a discretionary process, of course, through the BSA.
Trap shoot.
There you go.
All right, going to the notes that I had from the past points of contact this board has had, I don't have any notes on number 10. Is there any discussion on amusements? Yes, Henry.
Yes, and so thought exercise, so right on the corner of like Flatbush and Bedford, you have that abandoned Renaissance facility, right? Like it used to be some kind of senior day center. And then it's been like abandoned for a while. And so I have no idea what the square footage is. I don't know what's that zone for. But what I'm wondering is whatever that zone for, is this proposal basically saying today an arcade or a virtual reality could not be set up there, but in this future state, it wouldn't have to go through rezoning if it was one of these, someone could just come in and put in an amusement thing there.
Also, I think the Sears parking lot is C8.
Okay.
And there's a storage facility. The junction has many C8 areas.
Okay, gotcha.
So just to give it context in the district.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to set that like, because these are things that I passed in my neighborhood for years, so I'm just trying to visualize like what this would mean in the future state.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know the square footage either.
Okay.
I think the square footages are always difficult to kind of visualize, right? But I think what we do find often in our C1 and C2 overlays is you'll see storefronts, right? You'll see those retail storefronts a lot of times in kind of that like, with 2 or 3 stories of residential above. If you think about just divvying it down with the arithmetic, 25-foot frontage, sometimes 20, sometimes 30, whatever, to get to 10,000 would be, So we often we wouldn't expect a ton of those 10,000 square feet in those. That is possible though. I'm not going to call it out. And so in those C1 and C2 districts, those will be permitted by right as long as they fit in terminology, right? The amusement or recreation facilities, which are not really codified clearly right now.
Next question. District Manager.
Just going back to, I can't remember the year, but Jumaane Williams was still a city council member here, and we had a number of gaming businesses that opened up, and they were, the issue with them was that they were big gambling sites. So that would be my quality of life concern about this, and I don't know, I know again, this is not a zoning question, it goes to enforcement, but has that been a thought process as this has been put together, given that there's been a history of that in the city?
Yeah, is there an overlap between amusement and
Gambling.
not live?
Oh, that
gambling,
Pachenko.
but gaming?
Yeah, so this does not approve like a gaming facility type use in C1, C2 by the time that's 10,000 square feet. We have, the separate text amendment currently going through for a gaming facility, which this district does not have a proposal. So, but happy to talk more about that. This does not this does not establish any ability for a gaming facility, a legal gaming facility, which is, those that are not licensed and currently operating are not defined in zoning and are illegal. This would not allow for that to occur in C1 or C2s for any of the districts that are listed.
Thank you. So just clarify.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about liking and what's associated with the other zoning text amendment.
Yeah.
Is slot machines and other non-live that is also considered gaming and not included?
It is not included.
Okay, thank you.
Pachenko.
Mahjong?
Pachenko's a big gambling, that's what we were having problem with is Pachenko halls.
Greg,
But that is in here. You could open up a Pachenko's.
I'm not sure. I don't actually believe anything where money is.
Not
Pinball.
intentionally.
Well, yeah, that's my question. Is amusement or recreation facilities a defined term? Has that been defined?
It will be as part of this amendment.
What, do you have that? Do you know what the definition's going to
Get
be?
that up.
Well, I was just gonna say.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. While we wait.
Yeah, exactly. That it says up to 10,000 square feet for these facilities and maybe there might be a parameter in the other direction put on this that we can put on this, just so that you don't just take any storefront as long as it's in like the C1, C2 district and turn it into like a little virtual reality spot, like it might get out of hand.
Does this have a,
That direction?
yeah, does this have a competing use group with like retail? Like, would this be if in C1, C2, right, of up to 10,000 square feet? Does this have its own use group that is different from retail so that we're not supplanting retail necessities of the neighborhood with amusement?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but it wouldn't matter either way, because they would be allowed, and that whatever use group it is, whether it's the same, they'd be allowed. So the allowance would be the same.
So, okay.
And the other thing
Yeah.
that I wanted to just clarify, this is for indoor, as it pertains to our district. This is for mainly indoors, because the outdoor activities would require the BSA special permit, so that if somebody wanted to build something on the Sears parking lot, then.
Or on a roof.
Then that would require a whole other process of approval, so.
Yeah, the definition.
Yes, so here is the term. So an amusement or recreational facility is an establishment providing recreational or amusement activities not listed in the definition of health and fitness establishment or outdoor amusement park, or listed as other recreational or amusement uses under use group 8, which includes but are not limited to the following: establishments providing recreational activities such as pool halls, bowling alleys, table tennis, trampoline parks, skateboard parks, skateboard being that outdoor component, or indoor at a smaller scale. Establishments providing a range of amusement activities such as interactive virtual reality attractions, arcades, escape rooms, laser tag, go-karts, and miniature golf.
Okay. So I don't know, for me, that reads very overbroad because you have a very wide range of uses that are there. If, I were to throw anything out, it would just be maybe consider refining that definition a bit, or even separating out the definition into separate subgroups so that for those amusements that may create more activity and noise and that sort of thing, I think that, others have said, maybe that's a way to get at it, because I think, just looking at those 4 pictures, it's a pretty wide range of activities there. Difference between ping pong and an arcade can be very vast. So, I would just say maybe if we could refine those definitions, maybe that could be a way to address some of the comments that these I've heard.
Okay, last part of the discussion, and then we'll try to.
Yeah, so I think I'm experiencing something different when I hear this proposal. So when I think of the diversity of amusement organizations or businesses or whatever that could set up in our neighborhood, I view that as potentially something diversifying our commercial spaces and potentially improving it so that I don't have to go, I don't know, somewhere else to do VR gaming. Not that I do that now, but you know what I mean? And so I guess I'm hearing it differently, and it sounds like there's a concern that maybe those businesses might be like bad or replacing retail. It might be fine that like a bodega gets replaced with like, I don't know, a pinball machine store or something like that. And so I don't know that the addition of more sector businesses is inherently a bad thing. And I would encourage people, at least the way I see it, is it could potentially create a more dynamic neighborhood or commercial strip. Just to make sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
To Lisa's point is that that's why maybe there should be a condition on the lower end of the square footage so that there aren't all these pop-up, like a place with one ping pong table and they're just like using it as like a front business or something like that.
Well, let's start with, support. Those members that are in support of amusement, if you show of hands, please. Looks pretty unanimous. Only two, those not in support. One, do you have a? Huh? I didn't see your hand. You gotta keep it up, thanks. So only one opposed.
The killjoy. No fun.
Right, first of all, a lot of museums are doing virtual.
And moving on to conditions, I wanna understand both of your points a little bit better to see if we can, you're saying, let's say a space between 5,000 and 10,000, is that what you're saying? So
Yeah,
that you
exactly.
actually are providing the space to actually do something?
Right.
Okay,
So like maybe a little bit less than 5,000, 2,500 or
So
something.
how big is this?
Like this would be more than adequate for like an escape room.
This is probably 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
It's a little
So Felicia.
A little bit more, yeah, yeah. Let's come to the architect. Great.
You look at 46. Precise.
Greg Alvarez, trying to get at your point a little bit better.
Yeah, all I was saying there was, I think in spirit, it's a good idea. I agree with you that, it definitely can diversify, a strip of businesses. All I was saying was that it is kind of a wide range in terms of what the possibilities are and in terms of how the interpretations might go at the DOB once people start filing applications. So all I was saying was that I know we're trying to get away from that a little bit because there were a lot of antiquated uses that were in the code. But I see that as something that can be dynamic and, you can define it as a ping pong parlor or as a virtual reality, use, as opposed to keeping it so omnibus and allowing for that gray where there might be particular uses that slip in that maybe that wasn't the intention here. That's all.
So you want to know a zoning distinction between businesses that might be a little louder versus businesses that inherently are more quiet.
Right, just to go that second level, just to kick out those that
So-
might be virtual reality. Or
So like a 1,000,
Right.
like a 2,000 square foot bowling alley, which is maybe 3 lanes versus a 2,000 square foot.
escape room or whatever.
Many.
Escape room or something a little bit like, okay. So based on,
I'll try.
so there was a suggestion to limit the sizes as opposed to from 0 or 1 square foot to 10,000 square feet to give it a little bit more of a range to promote adequate space or enough facility space to operate the amusement. Does anyone want to second that condition before we take it to a vote?
Could you restate that condition one more time, please?
So I'll propose 2,500 on behalf of the 2,500 to 10,000 square feet. That means that anything less than 2,500 square feet would not fall into this.
Okay, sure.
Would not be as of right.
Gotcha.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor of that condition, let me know if I need to clarify it anymore. Am I speaking to what you were hoping for? Cause
Well,
you,
yeah, mostly. but
Mostly.
Are we, also voting on the minimum number of square feet?
2,500 to 10,000. Did you want a larger minimum, a smaller minimum?
Maybe a smaller minimum?
2,000?
No?
I think that. 2,000 would probably be this.
I'm her attorney.
It would, because I don't want it to be like above what is like something that can hold like 3 ping pong tables and be considered good amount of space. So, okay.
Do we necessarily have to be prescriptive, though? Is it fair to just ask DCP to go back and review this for a minimum size requirement so as to prevent the sort of like tiny spot amusements?
I think, sorry to cut you off.
No,
but I think
The
with
question
2,000,
wasn't for you. I think it was for the board.
I think 2,000 square feet is probably a good minimum to have. And there are probably plenty of spaces around the district where you can have a decent sized place to include facilities, bathroom facilities and blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
All the requirements. So
so
2,000.
if I could amend that motion to 2,000 to 10,000 being the applicable square foot for an amusement in these commercial districts. C1, C2. Right?
Sounds good.
Second motion, you do? Thank you. Okay. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got you. All those opposed? 2, 3, 4, 5.
And I'm staying.
Yeah, 5. So, and 1 abstention. So,
We have 6. I think
We had 6 in it.
I think we had 6.
It's Carl
6 to 6. All right.
and
So,
then everyone here, right?
so 6 to 6, the motion doesn't carry. How about, ask about this motion that we ask DCP to reconsider the minimum size limitations, so we're less prescriptive. Okay,
I second.
thank you. All those in favor? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that motion carries. We kind of need to move on. Can we add better clarification of the use groups, right?
Yeah, of the definition.
Of the
If there's-
definition,
yeah.
better clarification of the definition.
Sure, yeah.
So the motion is, Community Board 14 recommends better clarifications of the definitions of amusement. Anyone second? Those in favor? 12 opposed? 1 opposed. Okay, moving on. Home occupations. If we can get that slide up. Thank you. 1 to 2 minute introduction. And then-
I'll leave it pretty simple, I think. You know, I know you also know quite a bit about this. So home occupations exist already. I would be pretty shocked if there was anyone in this room who did not engage in it at some point over the last 5 years. Already exists, you know, for a wide range of businesses. You know, you could be a lawyer, you could be a jewelry maker, whatever. A lot of special districts actually expand this size. They actually expand the employee number to what is actually proposed now, and we found that to be rather successful without creating too much of a nuisance. And so we figured, given the way the economy works now, why not kind of expand that even further, right? So pandemic did cover a lot of this and did provide an impetus of this, but it was something that we've considered previously and something that already been permitted previously, right? So the first one, again, this is clarification of a lot of terms. There's a few things that are permitted there that aren't, and a few things that are not permitted to be from the home that we don't really understand. I can be a music teacher and have a bunch of kids playing loud trombones currently, but I can't be an interior decorator working at my computer. So we want to clarify that. We want to expand the size allowance from 25% of your dwelling, whether that be an apartment or a house, no matter how big it is. Currently, you're limited to 25%. Want to expand it to allow 49% so that when I have a call and then I go to a different room in my house, I'm not breaking the law all of a sudden. And then we want to allow up to 3 employees, which is already permitted in many special districts, to be permitted within the home-based business. We need to, again, reiterate, noise, the environmental rules, signage limits, no one will be allowed to have any signage indoors or outdoors, as is currently the rules. And you cannot actually sell anything that is not produced in the home, right? I can bake a couple cookies and then sell them to my friends. I cannot import goods and then resell them out of my home, right? So that is the rule that will maintain the rule. And of course, it will need to primarily be a dwelling unit. Another question that we've gotten sometimes, this is all under the guise of whatever your lease is, right? If you are a property owner, you put something in your lease that says, the city may allow this with me.
That was the question that I had.
That's correct.
Excellent. One thing I just want to point out that came up in conversation, you're expanding the allowance from 25% to 49% of the home. I just want to make note that, in order to take a home office deduction on your taxes, you have to have a room dedicated to your business. And it can't be, most likely that room is not 49% of your home. So you're incentivizing in some way with that percentage that people take a larger deduction, which is a murky area for the IRS. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in order to take I operate my business out of my home, right? IRS says that I can only use an enclosed space, which is usually a room. And the percentage of that space, which in my case is 12%, right? I can only deduct 12% of my utilities, 12% of my mortgage, 12% of my rent. What you're saying here is contrary to that. So I just want to note that there kind of needs to be a little synergy there, right? So if 49% of your home is an enclosed space and applies to the rules of the IRS for an in-house deduction or a home office deduction, then fine. But maybe not likely. It could be multiple rooms, but I'm thinking when you show us the pictures, it's somebody in their apartment, in a 2-bedroom apartment, and they're operating a business out of one room, and then they sleep in the other rooms, right? So there's it's a little murky there.
Right, and so the situation you're concerned about is what specifically? Like one where the room is not?
So then I now think that I am empowered to deduct 49% of my apartment because I'm allowed to use 49% of my apartment, and you are not.
You're allowed to use 49% of your apartment.
In the zoning rules.
You're not required to take the deduction on IRS. And to me, this seems like a bit of an equity issue because if someone lives in a 600 square foot apartment and they want to use 200 square feet of their apartment for their business, maybe they have a small office or an alcove or something, they wouldn't be allowed to do that under the current zoning. But if someone who is much richer and has a 2,000 square foot apartment wants to use 200 square feet, they can right now because of the 25% limit. You wouldn't, if you can use 49% of your home by zoning, that doesn't mean you have to deduct it on your taxes. You would still be limited by what the IRS allows you to deduct on the taxes. It just makes it more equitable for more people to have different types of businesses under this proposal.
I understand what the proposal is doing. I'm just saying that there is not a congruity between what we're doing federally and what they are proposing. So again, like kind of siloed, right? So I'm just saying that there is a conflict here from my perspective. And not everybody that has a home office or does their taxes goes to an accountant and does them. So they're going to say, oh, I'm using 49% of my apartment, so I'm going to deduct 49%. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay.
Wouldn't the IRS come back at them and say, no, you can't do that?
Theoretically, it might be 4 or 5 years.
But yeah, but then they're gonna wind up owing back taxes, which will not be pretty.
Okay, so I'm just gonna read what some of the notes, previous contact from the board with this item. In a community, these are some of the things that said in previous meeting. In a community of many large homes, who will enforce and how will there be a cap on the number of home use businesses on a block? within a radius. If a resident is selling a product not made on site, what will be the enforcement mechanism for that? Is there a way to address truck deliveries? Will homes be de facto distribution centers? And then the district manager made a note about 3 occasions about a home business that caused a lot of conflict in the district. One was a wig stylist, and that had to do with the amount of deliveries that were brought into the home. It was an apartment, right?
It was a private house.
Private house. The other was a cheese factory, and the last one was a dog kennel.
Oh, and the candle and soap place too.
Okay.
Just a quick point of clarification. I'm taking as many notes as I can based on what everyone's saying, but you're gonna send us all of these.
Yeah, this will be documented.
They're
Yeah.
gonna send them.
We're also, it's also recorded.
Okay, perfect. So
Go back and memorize.
To myself.
The dress rehearsal tomorrow.
So this is.
Oh my God.
Services, but, what?
No, Dina was asking something.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
There's no conflict either in short-term rental. Let's say that your business is short-term rental. You have a separate bedroom and you're going to say that my business is to let this room, right? So this isn't like, you see what I'm saying? This isn't going to contradict that.
I think I understand what you mean, where I operate a short-term rental, I rent out this room and that's a business, I say,
Mhm.
or something like
Right.
that. That, my understanding is even a short-term rental is still defined as a residence. I believe, because the use is still a residence, right? So if I rent out a room, it's still a residential use, again, per zoning. Can't speak to short-term
Like
rental.
Airbnb.
but-
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
So when are you getting?
Yeah.
Airbnb?
Yeah, that's what I mean, like the verbal and the thing.
Right,
Just another,
to my understanding, that still would be defined as a residential use, I believe, because again, Airbnbs could be renting out a room in a residence or renting out the entire apartment, right? And so there's kind of that thing. I can confirm on that, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it'd still be defined as residential use.
okay. All right, discussion.
2 things, and so out of curiosity, could the group let us know what is the list of the currently prohibited business types, right? Because it says it would remove that, so I'm curious what those are. And then the second thing too is remind me again, what was the thinking behind expanding the size allowance from 25 to 49%? Just because, as Chairwoman Brown had said, one of the questions we had was the enforcement, so I am curious about how was enforcement of 25% being done? How was that even feasible? And then since it's proposing an increase, then what would that, same question with the enforcement, what would that look like? So those are my 2 questions.
Sure. So while we look up, unless you have it, the existing list of prohibited uses,
If I can.
just on the current CR. Yeah. So while we look that up, I'll skip and go to the second point. I believe, was kind of spoke to that a little bit of the equity issue.
Mhm.
We're under no illusion that people are laying down tape in their apartment. If this is exactly 200, this is exactly 49% or something. But we found no reason to limit those of people who are already using 49% of their apartment or less than 50% of their apartment to conduct their business to currently be out of compliance. Really, you know what I mean? We have had a couple of situations where people have found that to be an issue, you know, call the police and so, oh, they're using 30% of their apartment, something like that, and found it to be kind of a non-issue, in fact, in terms of the actual nuisance. And again, this is something that's already being provided in many special districts in the city, where we didn't really find much of an issue. I don't know if that answers.
It did answer my question.
And then we'll get back to you about the
Okay.
current zoning resolution.
No problem.
Yes.
You have
Oh, you have it?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
the current list of what is currently not permitted.
Yes, because this has removed the list of the currently prohibited businesses, so I'm interested in
Yeah.
what those currently prohibited
You wanna
businesses
read
are.
that?
And I also want to, so here, shall not include advertising or public relations agencies, barber shops, beauty parlors, electricists.
Like,
Melissa, thank you. Interior decorator office or workshop, pharmacy, stockbroker office, veterinary medicine. I should note by saying that this list, when we say we remove this, it doesn't mean that there is not going to be, as we said, we introduce regulations that better fit what home occupation is today. And some of these that are not included will also still not be included as a part of this proposal.
So like, for example, the pharmacy or the veterinarian or any of those, under this, they would no longer be prohibited, but under a parallel piece of legislation, they would still be prohibited, or like, it depends on the lease, right? Or what else?
So what's currently listed highlights very specific industries, which some of them are also excluded from what we're proposing now. It's
Okay.
just that this is,
What's written to it?
this is currently, we're proposing a set of new regulations in terms of home occupations that are more encompassing, but also include some of the regulations too.
And very, very quickly, I think this speaks a little bit to the fact that we could talk about the specific businesses, but when we're worried about businesses, we're not worried about the business in the vacuum. We're worried about the impacts they have. And so we thought, why don't we regulate the impacts instead of the businesses themselves? That's the theory.
Yes.
And as to the point of the impacts, I just want to make sure they understand, what the city is basically saying is, these things are happening anyway. Let's just clear some of the red tape for the businesses that are already doing it. So, to that effect, enforcement issues, complaints, they would happen before are still probably going to happen in the future. It's not going to necessarily change. The question here that's being brought up seems like, which is some sort of concern, is that, we just want to regulate, now that it's all of a sudden becoming legal, we should regulate it more than what's being done in the past. Is that kind of what's going on here?
If I understand you correctly, then I think so. Like you said, it's already being done. And look, just because something's already being done doesn't mean it's fine, right? Of course.
Sure.
But in the case where something like this has already been done and has been done, we found that, or what we believe to be the case, or can, opine as they see fit. What we think to be the case to be appropriate would be, okay, well, let's allow up to 3 employees, right? Let's allow up to 49%, something that still ensures that this is a home primarily. And that, a home-based business should not be excessively prohibited. And again, what I do in my home, when we talk about impacts, even if I don't run a business, I could still make a lot of noise. I could still rumble the floor. I could still jump up and down, so it's difficult for us to justify that kind of difference.
Yes.
Just, I don't understand then how this addresses an equity issue. If it's 49% of my 600 square foot apartment versus 50% of my, 2,000 square foot home, you still are limiting what somebody in a smaller unit can do. So why have any percentage at all? If I'm gonna have if I live in a 600 square foot unit and I'm gonna have 3 employees, chances are we're taking up 100% of the space. So I'm wondering about the percentage of all. And then I'm gonna ask a question about this. In terms of the community boards you visited, which I know is a lot, you've been working really hard, and other hearings, would you say that number 11 is the one that's getting the most pushback or consternation or concern?
To answer the second question, it runs the gamut.
Just when I was looking on the ZAP portal, it seemed like 11 was on everybody's condition.
11 definitely got a lot of attention, right? We can all kind of tell, I think, a lot of the ones that got attention, right? But there were also, Brooklyn varies the city varies so widely and kind of like the different things that happen here. And so some people are focused a lot on the campuses because they have a lot of NYCHA campuses, not really a thing here in CB14. So it kind of runs the gamut. 11 got a lot of attention though. Your first question of why limit it at all? Because then it's not a home. Right? If I'm using 100% of my home for a business, then it's not right. Then it's not primarily a home.
If I still live there, my family comes home and my kids do their homework there and I go to sleep there. And then during the day I run my business, it's not my home?
You could also put in the condition that you think that this should be the entire apartment. I guess I'm kind of missing like the thing here. I think the purpose is that we still want to enforce, I think we still want to send the message and kind of enforce that it still is primarily a residence and that you can, yes.
Then let's not call it an equity effort.
I think the point I bring about equity is that if, say, you wanted to be a production potter, because that's one of the types of home uses that are in here. If you want to have a pottery studio with a pottery wheel and a small amount of table for something and some shelves for whatever you're doing, and you live in 600 square feet, you cannot do it under 25% of your home. But if you live in somewhere that's like 1,000 square feet, you probably could. And so allowing it to be a slightly higher amount so that if someone who lived in a smaller space, because that's what they can afford or that's what they choose to still have a home business that's still well below 49%, allows more people that specific opportunity than it does under the current ruling. So I just want to clarify, that's what I meant by equity, in case that's helpful for anyone else hearing it.
Well, I want to use your example for another example, and at the Borough Board public hearing, the same testimony from the same retired lieutenant who testified that you had not gone to the FDNY with these concerns, brought up home use expansion and not being able to know exactly what is going on in the unit before they are responding. So you have the potter and their pottery wheel and their shelves, but there's also a kiln.
Maybe they might be bringing it to a local studio to fire, but
Or they have a kiln. I had a glass kiln in my apartment when I was running my business, right? Which would go up to 900 degrees. So again, I'm just bringing up a point that FDNY should have some say over what is the allowable uses in a home based on how they are going to respond, right? So if they're going into a situation, they want to know, well, it's not going to be X, Y, and Z. We know that. It's just going to be professional offices or barbershops, or you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So, you know, a fire from a pottery kiln or a glass kiln or some other thing that is happening associated with the home use expansion, that list really needs to be done in conjunction with FDNY and what is going to be allowable in a home use business.
But just to clarify, you're already legally allowed to have a kiln or something, as you mentioned yourself. This wouldn't change that proposal. This would just allow for more people to be able to do something instead of like, I feel your concern and I agree with the safety issue, but I think that that's tangential to how much space someone is allowed to use.
Well, this is doing two things. It's changing the allowable use businesses that can be used. And it's changing the size of the amount of space that you can use.
So the specific businesses that are allowed to be used don't pose fire hazards in this way, and kilns are already allowed. That's what I just don't understand.
Well, perhaps it was already allowed, but what I'm asking is that, again, they be less siloed and they get more information from the agencies that actually have to respond to a fire or some other, you know, situation, DEP and water or whatever it be.
Yeah, I just want to point out to your point is that fire safety doesn't just have to do with necessarily making a fire. It has to do with being able to safely leave the building, and sometimes there's some other security considerations that these other agencies are saying that they don't have enough input into these regulations that are being put forward that have to do with you know, the health, safety, and welfare of people living.
No, I understand that. I just
So
don't.
it's not just about, like, let's say, having that kiln, you know, and causing a fire. It could be other things.
Yeah, and I understand that. And I
Yeah.
do see that if people have more space, that for something like this, they might put more stuff in it. But at the same token, you can also just become a hoarder and put tons of stuff in your apartment and create the same dangerous conditions. So it's not a zoning concern.
So, any other discussion? Because we're kind of out of time on this one. Yes,
So can we,
hold on. Yeah. Yes.
oh, so can we add a list of prohibited type of business?
I don't think it's up to
That's-
us. Again, this is, you know, this is what really pisses me off, frankly, because now I'm going to sit here and I'm going to talk about all of the things that we are afraid of, right? All of the businesses. That's not up to us. Why do we have to do the due diligence here? No, this should be the city agencies that they met with that say, you know what? let's back off on this, this, and this, because we see our problem with this. So I honestly, I don't want to sit here and do anybody else's work. This is not our work, right? And it shouldn't be our work, especially at the size of this. And it's a good suggestion. It just, triggered me a little bit. This is like a little bit.
I do have one question and then there's a suggestion to potentially move us along. Could you just describe the relationship between this proposal and the combination with a few other things like the light manufacturing and like the multi-level, the commercial on multiple levels? So you could potentially have a building that has separate entrance and has a commercial on multiple floors, and then in one of the residential units on the side, like a home run business, and then potentially like a rooftop thing or something.
Yeah.
And or like an urban agriculture thing, right?
These are the questions I love, this whole Venn diagram of this proposal.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just trying to make sure.
The answer.
I guess to like answer that question, it, for the upper floor commercials,
Yep.
that only is limited to a very limited geography, especially in C14
Sure.
to C1, C2s, and some of the other Cs. There could be a potential where you could have a building that has a second floor commercial, also residences that have home-based businesses in them.
Yeah.
That's a realistic thing that could happen. But there's those proposals really focus on commercial areas. This proposal is
Cover residential and stuff.
Yeah.
So why don't we, I mean, just to collect some of the sentiment here, why don't we, well, I would suggest that we approve this on the condition that they run this by FDNY or whatever.
And then we're gonna move to,
Yeah, just to be even less prescriptive is to say that either approve or not approve with the, well, if you want to approve, Community Board 14 approves, but expresses a deep concern that that this is lacks clarity and is too broad, and
but the list of allowable home businesses.
the change in allowances is unclear.
The list of allowable businesses should be brought to other agencies for clarification, right? Okay. So those in support of number 11. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those opposed? 2. Anyone abstaining? 1, okay. And with regards to the condition that District Manager Sean Campbell put out there, is that I'll bring that to you as a motion. Anybody second that?
Second.
As a condition? All those in favor of that condition?
You restate it.
That the allowable, the change in allowable businesses in the home use expansion shall be made in coordination with other agencies such as FDNY, DOB, DEP, et cetera.
Thank you.
Okay? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, nice. Okay, moving on. Number 12.
Streetscape proposal. Great. There we go. One more. There we go. Okay. Right. So, streetscape proposal. We can see kind of a bunch of different things going on here. So right now, for what businesses are required to do in the streetscape, there's a lot of confusion, right? And again, we want to provide clarification to make sure that our commercial corridors are vibrant and safe and have eyes on the street, all that good Jane Jacobs stuff. And then make sure that that there's clarity for what people need to do as business owners, right? So it's a little bit different from some of the other proposals about expanding what's allowed where. This is about the public realm, but still on your private property, right? So right now, we don't actually have a lot of guiding street level design that's actually codified. right? We have a lot of urban designers in our office who do great work. But it's difficult for them to enforce some of these things. And so we found kind of a tiering system, which we can go into if you'd like, but there's lack of consistent regulations. We have a lot of them in our special districts throughout the city. We found those to be pretty successful. And so taking cues from a lot of those special districts, as well as learning from other cities that have some of these regulations, we thought, okay, what's a good way to create pleasant, vibrant commercial corridors, and also safer corridors, right? The number of curb cuts and people going in and out of properties creates a lot of, potential hazard points, which is an issue, right? So we want a consistent and easy to understand framework. I can get into, if you go one more, I think we actually have the tiers. Yeah. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm happy to answer questions, but basically we've got 3 tiers, right? Tier A is you're going to have streets in the commercial districts, right? The overlays, the C1s and C2s. You don't have any C4s, C7s, and the MXs, which you also don't have. We're going to regulate where you can, the parking locations, the drive-throughs, right? That's that safety issue and also the pleasantness issue. And make sure that any blank walls you have are actually decorated or reduced as much as possible. Tier B, these are even more of our central streets because they tend to be within the transit zone. They tend to have a little bit more activity. It's all the same rules. Plus, we're going to have regulations on ground floor residences because we want to have more active uses there of, people window shopping, going in and out. Lobby lengths so that lobbies are not taking up entire frontages because those are not particularly active uses. Transparency, parking enclosure to make sure that parking is not kind of annoying, the streetscape. We like consistent street walls and find those to be safer and more vibrant, and curb cut locations. And then tier Cs, which is in certain special districts, we're going to have basically all those rules and then a more robust list of building elements that must be there. About streetscape regulations that kind of go into a little bit more detail, but I'll leave it at that for the sake of time.
Thank you. Any discussion on this matter, questions? All right.
Then I hear tier B actually would prohibit ground floor residential in some zoning districts?
It would limit ground floor residential in certain districts. And I believe, I think it's just a limitation, if I understand correctly.
What's the distinction between a prohibition and a limitation?
But basically I need to get the details on that, which I'm happy to do. And to clarify also, residential does not eliminate residential lobbies or residential, I don't know, other activity space. It's an actual residence in which I open my window, I'm looking right at people who are looking in at me, that kind of stuff.
That is the trend in building now. I mean, I got 2 new buildings that just finished the end of 2023 where the entire ground floor is
A lobby.
residential. No, there are windows that I could stand in. They have to put film over them so that they have privacy. I mean,
Or like a house.
But these are in commercial districts.
so a building in a commercial district, not the residential district.
Yeah, to go back, once more, I need to. Sorry, forward once more. There it is. Yeah, so these do not cover residential. These do not cover residential districts that are not in a commercial overlay or not.
Okay, so
Residential, yeah, oh my God. I was about to say, yeah, no one can live anywhere.
Yeah.
Residential districts can stay exactly where they are. But if you're a residential district within a commercial overlay, again, those tend to be those like local neighborhood commercial stores. You usually see like retail with commercial above.
Oh, I see.
Additional discussion, questions?
These are
Oh.
design guidelines, they're not regulating the use.
Right, well.
Wait, it says it limits residential use, not design.
That is one example, yes.
So it does limit use, not just design.
Was I mistaken there?
What he's saying is that there will be certain uses that are limited in certain of these tiers, right? In tier C, there's more robust building elements, and in tier B, ground floor residences will be limited. Yeah, and so you'd only have them above the ground floor. So yes, to your point,
Thank you.
most of it is about design, but yeah, but some use.
I mean, the only question I have is a consistent one with a good portion of these, and like the board has said too, it's just I'm curious about enforcement, right? Like what what would enforcement look like?
Well, enforcement in this case is a little bit easier because you could see it, right? So this is not something usually happening inside of a residence necessarily where you need to go inside and see, what's going on in here.
You'd be filing plans, right?
Yeah, and you'd also be filing plans, right? So it's
It
important.
would be a DOB enforcement for a zoning violation.
Which is the same as,
Which you've said you've almost never seen.
But that's
Ever.
that's the thing though,
Ever
right?
seen.
Who would
Thank
be, yeah, there's a process on paper, but who would be the actual boot on the ground to confirm this?
Yeah, like for, I'm sorry, like for vegetation, is that going to be Parks Department? Who actually looks at that to make sure that they don't die and that sort of?
Who plants the trees that are supposed to be planted?
Well,
This is not retroactive. This is only.
right, yeah.
Oh, only for new.
Yeah. Retroactive, I mean, it would be all new construction, all rent, anything you're pulling a permit for, then you have to come up to code, and this is the code.
Nice.
For renovation.
Any additional discussion? Because we got 5 minutes left, we could use that somewhere else. Or we could put it back in our deficit. All right, all those that support, number 12? All those that oppose? 2, 3. Abstaining?
No, I think
You said, it's hard, her head's right where your arm is. Thank you. And since there was a robust.
Excellent, Barb, it's nice, sometimes.
She's not fun,
Sorry.
but she's nice.
Thanks. No, there were no conditions for this, right?
Correct.
Okay, great, no conditions. Moving on to number 13, see, this is where we're gonna lose that 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, if we can have you talk about it.
We could, we just say no real quick.
Yeah, let's just say no real quick.
This is my,
You can just take a quick vote, depending on in favor.
All those in support.
Wait, I don't even, can I?
We gotta use it.
It's like 2
Wait, I'll do it.
sentences. You got it.
It's just, it's Coney Island Avenue.
Yeah, report undermines.
Coney Island Avenue, Bedford Avenue.
This is actually adding a little bit of regulation at the end of the day. quite frankly.
Get them out of the budget
May I?
Yeah.
and out of the transport.
May I? So, there are auto servicing uses and repair uses that are not really clarified that well in the zoning resolution between heavy uses of big auto repair shops and something where you just need to get your windshield, fixed real quick, or you need to get your upholstery inside your car fixed real quick. What we want to do is partially clarify the difference between those two, and then after clarifying that difference, right? The higher ones are those that are actually regulated by the DMV, or not regulated, they're all regulated, but they have to be registered as such with the DMV. They'd only be allowed in the C8 districts, of which I know you do have, and in the M districts, right, which you have a couple of them, right? Those light auto serving uses, right? The light auto serving uses where I need to get my upholstery fixed, right? I need a quick oil change. I think that would be fine, or a windshield or something like that replaced, where I don't want to have to go all the way to an M district, drive my car or get it towed in certain cases, all the way to an M district or whatever. Those would be allowed by a BSA special permit discretionarily in C1 through C7 districts, right? So what this does is it helps eliminate some of this situation, right? And what we're trying to do. What we have and what you see in a lot of these situations, and Lucia and Eve, feel free to add on to this kind of explanation, is what we see is we see people registering as, we're not registering with the DMV or nothing like that. It's just some light, service like that. But instead, they're actually doing a lot of heavy uses inside and parking a lot of cars and doing a lot of that replacement on the outside. By clarifying the difference between the two, and again, this is going into the future, you'll need to file these plans, which actually makes sense, and the BSA can review, hey, do they actually have enough space for circulation? Is this, mitigate some of the issues we see here, where there actually be, sidewalk area? We think that we can help eliminate this situation while still allowing folks to live in the area to get a quick oil change or a quick windshield fixed without going to a deeper district.
Okay.
So somewhat clear.
I'll read the comments that the board had previously stated. Outstanding clarification on what constitutes light repair. how this proposal addresses spillover between the two, whether non-compliant auto body business will nevertheless be grandfathered in. Car painting versus, flat fixed places, all or nearly all of Coney Island Avenue car shops spill over. Some are heavy repair, others are light. This is another frequent service delivery request that only gets very rare effective enforcement. And having sat through a BSA public hearing on this board when I was a wee lass for one of the shops on Coney Island Avenue, there was a good deal of a public response to that and not wanting that permit, that 10-year permit to be reissued.
Bedford Avenue.
Yeah, Bedford Avenue. Okay, starting the clock. Yes.
So if I understand it right now, it sounds like the goal is different from what the actual ramification would be. Because like right now, you can't in a C1 to C7 district have this kind of a business, of any kind of auto business, correct? You can?
Yeah, in a C2, I believe C2, C4, and C6 district, you can have an auto body shop. What we're doing is we're clarifying the two different auto services shops, making sure that's very clear where they can locate and that actually we're adding a step for new auto shops across the board in C1 through C7 districts that they have to go to the BSA.
Okay, could we instead change it that the existing, instead of C1 or request, instead of C1 through C7, that it was, I think you said 2, 4, and 6, am I right?
Yes.
Like, because I don't think we want to expand where auto repair can get done, especially light repair, because, you know, every auto repair place I've ever been to looks like that. And the more space we give to that, the worse the pedestrian landscape is going to be. But it would make sense to try to limit the number of heavy uses as much as we can. I don't know if there's a way we can like massage that, because I think I do share the general negative sentiment on this. But if there's if there's any parts we can pick out and be like, do this so that we have fewer locations that have auto uses, and especially the heavy auto uses that do make it really dangerous, like we see along Coney Island Avenue, I think I would be excited about that.
Okay, so I'm just putting this out there as a condition, right? Just so we don't forget it. So you're proposing that there be no auto services in districts other than previously are, which is 2, 3, and 4. So
I'll double check just to make sure.
Okay, additional discussion.
I'll just piggyback on that. So are you saying that we should also, what should we do about the differentiation between the light and heavy then? So if we keep it in the same zones, would there be a differentiation amongst the zones as to light and heavy? Is that the suggestion here? Or?
I guess just to speak to my suggestion, like I don't know the right way to to put it into zoning, and perhaps people here who are smarter than me on that can definitely help with it. But, I think the fewer large, heavy things we can find as possible are ideal, especially like when they're conglomerated all along Coney Island Avenue. I mean, I think the issue is that there's so many of them, but also it's not clear to me that we need all of this business as much as it's there. And I don't want to say someone's business isn't valid. I would like for all these people to have their, livelihoods and so forth. But, there is a balance of issues here, including pedestrian safety. I don't know. Greg, you're probably better at wording than I am.
I'm started thinking about that, because if the objective is to just kind of keep it oriented to certain districts, maybe the light and heavy differential doesn't much matter, right? I mean, what is the proposal? Maybe I'll pose that to you. What is the differentiation then between light and heavy in terms of the districts, and I guess in terms of whether or not you need BSA or not? I guess that's what we're talking about here.
So the DMV, it would be those registered with the DMV would be considered heavy. What does that mean? It includes repairing or diagnosing motor vehicle malfunctions, repairing motor vehicle bodies, fenders, or other components damaged by an accident or otherwise. The exceptions to that which would be light auto repair would consist of fueling, oil change, water, battery, or tires.
Okay, and is there a difference in terms of where one would be situated and one where is it?
This, the later one, which includes fueling, oil changing, water, batteries, et cetera, that would be in the light auto servicing in C1 through C7.
See,
Can we
okay.
go back to the applicability map so we can see the districts? Right, that'd be helpful.
And then the heavier would be in C8 and then M districts.
Could be, yeah.
at the beginning.
I'm just thinking like.
Bella was pointed.
That,
Company on.
just to give it context, right? Like, so we would be, seems to be limiting, DMV heavy
One more.
to just C8 and M. When currently it is allowed in C2 through 4 or i.e. Coney Island Avenue, right?
Yes.
And those businesses that are on Coney Island Avenue, they will
Right.
stay that way until someone chooses to no longer operate that type of business there.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, so here's the C2 districts. There are C1s as well, right? So we can, they're the C1s on the west side of the district with the C2s, here. So these are the places where if you want to operate even a light automobile use.
You'd have to, for the light auto repair uses, you'd have to go through the BSA, and a part of that process baked in is that you'd have to prove that you'd stay within your zoning lot, your business would stay within your zoning lot. So not spill out into like the sidewalk, street.
So then.
No,
they never do that.
No, and none of the heavier, and as part of that, none of the heavier uses are permitted in any of these districts. They'd only be permitted in the C8 districts, and the M districts would be the heavy ones.
Nina and then Carl. And then.
There's no enforcement. And anybody who goes down Coney Island Ave or Bedford Ave or probably parts of Flatbush Ave can testify there is zero enforcement, and it is a nightmare. It is a nightmare for anyone who's traveling down those streets and has to make a right-hand turn from the left side lane because, or allow other traffic in and all the other juggling that goes on because there is zero enforcement, even with the existing rules. So how is this going to make things better? Where's the enforcement?
So we'll take Carl's comment and then I'm gonna throw a motion at you since we've discussed it.
Meeting ending. Oh. I'm just taking.
Oh, well, see you.
It's a good thing you're here,
Carl.
Yeah, so the comment about the light one having to go through BSA to basically prove that would be, in case this, went through, it would be for any new businesses. The existing ones wouldn't have. Okay, gotcha.
Which is a process that currently doesn't exist.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about, same thing we keep talking about Coney Island. It's not Pet Boys, is it AutoZone? The one that's on the corner of like Coney Island and Church Avenue?
Yeah, it's out of them.
Yeah, AutoZone, right? It's like everybody's fixing their car every day.
Yeah.
It's,
All
Yeah,
right,
they
so
Parking lot.
So here's the consensus I'm seeing. We really like the confinement of the heavy use to heavy vehicle repair to C8 and M districts, right? That kind of keeps it off Coney Island Avenue. What we don't like is we don't like the expansion of the light vehicle repair into every single C district. And even with the BSA, because the BSA also really just depends on who's the chair and what the board looks like and, how, whether it's snowing or raining outside. In terms of, getting the vote and so what I'm sort of proposing is we vocalize that we agree with the heavy use, and then we vocalize that we do not want to see a change. And maybe even, I would say, based on experience, restricted to the old C districts, which is 2, 3, and 4.
2 and 4.
2 and 4. And new ones would need a BSA.
Can we also, instead of just change, say no expansion, just so it's clear that we don't want to expand the locations?
Sure.
Don't expand number of C districts allowed.
No expansion. And do we like the idea that new light needs a BSA?
That's baked into this?
It is, but I think it's a good thing to, all right, so now, yes,
I'm sorry, just add one thing. So he said C2 we're okay with, but C2 is Coney Island, right?
Coney Island C8?
Or no?
So that's, yeah, that brings another kind of wrinkle into it. I mean, C8 districts, let's talk a little bit about, like 1961 again. What was going on in 1961? We thought cars were going to be the future, and so we said, great, let's map all these CA2 districts all over the place. And what is resulted is one we see on Coney Island Avenue, right? That's kind of one of the things we're talking about. You will notice that there are very few, if any, C8 districts mapped where they're not currently nowadays, because we recognize some of the issues that come with that. And the issues that come with that are environmental, safety, et cetera, right? And so this does not rezone any place in the city right now. If there were to be a rezoning, it would have to be in the future. It would be separate from this action, right? So C8 districts that do remain in the city, some places, maybe not in CB14, may really like them. They actually may be appropriate, right, to have some of those. And so we said, well, that could be an appropriate place to have a heavy DMV registered place. Coney Island Avenue, hearing your concerns about the status quo, is something that we recognize we need to study a little bit more, and we are studying, in fact. However, this is not something that we're rezoning. And so that's kind of the difficulty we have, where we recognize, again, pointing to neighborhood by neighborhood analyses. We are reviewing Coney Island Avenue in a pretty detailed way right now to find what's really appropriate there, and then help to transition that into something that's a little bit safer. That's just not part of what is being done here. We're not rezoning any properties as a result.
we know that, yeah, we understand. All right, so my recommendation is going to be do not support unless the registered, the heavy vehicle repairs is in C8 and the M district. No, unless light vehicle repair sees no expansion is kept to C4, C2 and C4. So do not support unless there is no expansion.
A second.
Oh.
Is that what you're looking for? Sorry.
You
I don't know, I kind of think that the issue with this proposal, it lies in DCP revising it. Because it sounds like the issues that are concerning this district have to do with cars encroaching on bike lanes, encroaching on pedestrian spaces. And I think that the proposal needs to be changed completely to have even more prescriptive, guidelines, the same way how with the previous proposal, the streetscape one, that it sounds like there's gonna be specific, square footage, percentage.
I understand. So we really need to get to wrapping this up, because we're almost on 2 hours and we still have 5 more.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify the proposal here. If we're trying to just reject this outright, then isn't it staying in C2 and C4? Do we have to add a condition that it's not expanding?
I think it's just to clarify our thinking, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't ever want to just be like, no, because we want them to understand why the no is, because that informs their decisions now and their future decisions about when they are working on other things. But I agree with you to not only the first condition would be with no expansion, but the second would be to retool how cars enter and exit the pedestrian right of way, and making that and codifying that in zoning so that the onus isn't on BSA to approve a design, right?
Right.
Okay. I hope everybody got that, because I don't really want to say that again. We're gonna look at the videotape to write it out nice. All right. So do I have do not support with the first condition and the second condition? Unless they're not. Oh, sorry, raise your hand. Does anybody object? One objection? No, no objection. Okay. All right, moving on. Huh?
One abstention.
One abstention. Okay, sorry. Trying to move fast. You are welcome to scream at me. Yeah, all right. You're not allowed to sit there anymore. You know it's your seat. And I can't see you. I like to be a flower too.
Number 14.
Number 14.
She was there last time. Okay, so number 14, again, I'll go rather quickly. This is a situation that we see a lot. You've probably seen it as well. We do not like this. This is not safe. This is not effective. This is something that actually we've spoken to this board about very specifically a couple weeks ago, right? So it's a black nursery. So we don't actually have any situations where what a post office does, for instance, is they got their big main post office in the city, and then they've got smaller distribution facilities to make for more efficiency, to make sure that we don't have like a massive 18-wheeler delivering 1.5 million parcels all over the city where it doesn't necessarily make sense. So what we do is we want to create a new use, a micro distribution facility, right? This is a place where I'm a small business and I have parcels that maybe can be delivered very easily in the neighborhood on a bike courier or a real quick in a car, somebody coming in, dropping off. But we're seeing a lot of the bikes and people just picking them up sometimes. That would also be permitted. Those would be permitted closer to the homes and offices where they're actually being delivered, right? Again, post offices, they already do this. Why don't we allow private business to do this as well? So we want to limit it to 2,500 square feet in the commercial overlays, which you have many, up to 5,000 square feet in the C4 through C7 districts, of which you have none. Anything larger than that only can be allowed per a special permit by the BSA or the CPC, depending on kind of what you're doing. Either way, it would be a discretionary process. It would have to go through the community board if you want to exceed that 2,500 square foot limit. And we'd also prohibit the papering over of these windows so that there are none of these dark stores. The streetscape rules that you mentioned previously would still apply.
All right, let me just check to see if we have any notes previously. Number micro-distribution locations, traffic impact, volume of loads that can be off and unloaded. Bike deliveries were given as an example, but does not mean that there won't be a car, van, or a truck deliveries. How does this proposal interact with last mile trucking facilities which exist in M district as of right? Is there any community input, BSA permit requirements? Is there a stopgap measure to balance competing curb uses such as express bus lanes and truck routes? So here we're thinking about Church Avenue, where you could see a micro distribution facility. All of a sudden Bobby's turns into a micro distribution facility, and then what happens to that express bus lane when you're unloading and loading packages, truck routes, Church Avenue is a truck route, and so on and so forth. Discussion, yes.
I'm wondering for these micro distribution places, did city planning do, I guess, any sort of analysis on like the viability of them? Because I'm just thinking of like, there's like Getter, there's like Gorilla, there's like a bunch of these little hole in the walls, like points that are like, we'll deliver your groceries in 15 minutes or fewer. And throughout the city, wherever I walk by them, anecdotally, it feels like 1 out of 3, they put up the paper bag windows within like a month. And so I'm wondering if these are the kinds of businesses that this is thinking of, in addition to, like the post office example.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is exactly the same thing, but I know there was discussion of the last mile facilities, those larger facilities as well. That's a completely different matter, right? That is something that we need to study at the neighborhood level, right? Much more specifically, and we are. We didn't find it necessarily appropriate to put it into the ZEO, right? So that's why we have these limitations, these size limitations. And then the viability of certain businesses.
Yes, exactly.
It's kind of like any other business, right? Certain businesses could, find viability with them. We think that that's the case. All these proposals came with our business community kind of like giving their input into them. And as well, this one was formed in correspondence with the Department of Transportation as well, right? As we heard previously. So there may be very few places in which they find this to be viable in certain areas, and if so, none will open. Sure. But we do find that there to be viability in certain areas, and we think that that would eliminate something like this, where instead of having something like this, you'd have kind of a continual person kind of going around making those small deliveries, or people picking up just from the neighborhood, right? If I have a small business and I say, okay, you can pick up this little pottery thing or whatever, you can go down and pick it up.
Felicia.
I just have a question. Doesn't this already exist? I mean, like you can pick up your Amazon package, right? Like at a local place. Are those places not legal or?
Not when they're exclusively for this use. A lot of times those are like in a part of a supermarket or something like that.
Okay.
And what happens with, you mentioned, Getir or Getter,
Yeah,
whatever. That is actually, part of this proposal because currently it isn't defined and it is operating under a retail use, which it's not actually entirely retail use, right? But there's not a definition for it currently in our zoning. And so they're currently operating under DOB's definition of a retail use. And they also are not subject to some of the streetscape regulations that we're hoping to provide in this proposal to reduce some of the negative impacts they have on streetscape and enjoyability of commercial areas.
Next, Greg.
Yeah, I think with these, at least from my perspective, I've seen one of those Getter, locations. There's one in Brooklyn Heights, actually, that I drive by, all the time. And just the behaviors you see there, it's concerning, I'll say, because, especially if you have the motorbikes that are going to be the chief means of delivery. What I see is in just very snapshot way, it's just you see the behaviors of those vehicles that they're coming down that one-way street, they're using the sidewalk, and it just happens to be when I drive past, it's not very busy, but it's Brooklyn Heights, and imagine those times when it actually does get busier. And so my concern is that it just brings that activity pretty much everywhere at this point if we're going C1, C2. And I just concerned, I think, in terms, like we've mentioned on all these about enforcement, really, is there a mechanism here? Because once they're open, even if they have a nice streetscape, you're going to have that activity. And that's, I think, the concern in allowing them just essentially in any commercial district. But
Musa and then.
Question. So I think when you guys presented to the transportation committee of the district, there was partly a discussion around existing practices as it relates, I think, to UPS, but I might be wrong. Because I think UPS currently, if they can, you can either arrange for delivery from like a partnering local business like a bodega or something, or a utility store, or you can go pick up your own. I know I have. So I think because they're operating through some carve out or something like that. My question is, if my recollection of UPS is correct, I understand how you could reduce road congestion because there are tons of times where I go and decide to pick up my package from one of these stores instead of getting it delivered directly to me. But on the other side, do you have any data or information around whether, for example, someone like UPS is actually delivering in a more micro fashion or more convenient fashion, something like that, as opposed to just using their trucks? I just want to try to understand out of the existing environment, what do we know and what do we not know?
There's there's actually a DOT pilot program with these micro distribution and alternative distribution. I'm happy to share that pilot. It is something that currently there are a lot of places where you can go pick up your packages. As I mentioned, those are probably operating under retail. There isn't a definition in the same way that we're hoping to provide one here. But I'm happy to forward that pilot that DOT is working on. We have been working really closely with DOT on this program. We have our own I wasn't here at the transportation committee, but we have our own transportation department who worked avidly on this project as well, really trying to help safety on streets. And
I'm assuming that that is generally positive if you're looking to expand it, then.
Yes.
Okay.
Liz and then.
I'm just wondering how, if DOT has, if there's been any discussion between DOT and DCP about expanding loading zones in conjunction with this, or if there's a process by which, when a new, business of this nature might go in to expand loading zones, because my understanding is that often there will be a truck delivering the large set of packages and then it will be delivered by micromobility after that. But that truck, without having a dedicated spot where it can be loading and unloading is, I think everyone in this district has seen trucks unload in very unsafe ways and block bus lanes or block entire travel lanes or so forth. And just wanted to know if there was any process that would ensure that there'd be like something put in conjunction with it.
I was not in those DOT discussions. They have been talking about, these designated loading zones. I know that other boards have mentioned designated loading zones in their recommendations as well. It's something that I think, happy to follow up on. I know you're responding tonight, but just for clarity, I think we are happy to follow up to make sure,
Yeah, that is also a difficulty. The Department of City Planning, we have no jurisdiction over the streets, right? So what we're doing is working with people who actually do, right, in DOT and making sure that, hey, these are these facilities. How do we make sure that these facilities, even if they exist, to your point, don't have this as much as possible? And so they're working on that and they're piloting different programs or considering different opportunities to actually make sure that safety is prioritized.
I have a question. So I'm just want to define, is this supporting existing businesses, i.e. UPS, FedEx, LaserShip, or is it supporting existing businesses and supporting the expansion of other kinds of businesses, right? Like micro distribution of groceries in a Getter sort of gorillas fashion. So
What's the intention?
what is the intention?
I would say probably a little bit of both, right? So like, for instance, if I'm a very small business, right, and I could say, oh, you could pick something up here. I may not have the space of inventory done. I want to deal with it. I could say, okay, it's actually 2 blocks away at this place. You can get it delivered, whatever. UPS is actually public, right? So there's already a carve out for that, right? So like a post office, this is again reiterating, post offices, they already are allowed to do what is proposed here, right? So that's a carve out. In terms of supporting FedEx or something like that, that's not really the intention that we're going for.
Okay, so
But-
there would be a third party operator operating a micro distribution business.
So I think it's kind of, there's no way to have the same kind of distribution center except for a tier, which is getting under like retail uses. Because it's a grocery delivery, there's other, types of delivery. I think this proposal is the potential for, say, a smaller, like a UPS to open up another spot that is dedicated to delivering packages in a small scale on commercial corridors. That doesn't exist right now. So yes, it's opening up for UPS, but there's also no ability for other businesses to even open to have a similar structure.
Okay,
So it's kind of opening up for both types.
okay, I got you. I understand. All right, so let's, we really need to move on, honestly, but yes.
No, just one thing I wanted to mention is that similar to like the authorized stores that UPS have, because some of them do have those drop off where you can pick up your packages.
Yes.
Instead of like it being an actual UPS store, it's just another store that has that authorized dealership where you can go and pick up or drop off.
And a lot of the times, my understanding is those tend to be in like a Walgreens or something.
Yeah, they're
Right.
currently housed in a different business, so like Walgreens or Whole Foods.
But
Allowing it to
some
be
stores are
standard.
franchised, so they franchise with UPS, so they're not really. They're not owned by UPS, so the authorized, they're all franchised. So you can go out and buy one and operate a package store like that, where you do shipping and all the things, so I think it's different in that sense. But, so thoughts, I'll start with, who supports micro distribution, those in favor of supporting.
It's gonna work.
4, 5, 6, thanks. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3. Those abstaining? 2. Can you just briefly in like a snippet, tell me why you oppose, Greg? Yeah. the activity?
Well, clearly there has to be a solution here in terms of getting packages to everybody and, it's a logistical nightmare. We know it. But I don't know if in this case, it necessarily solves the problem by reorienting that last stage into smaller scale retail areas. It seems to me that there's still enough opportunity in, say, higher level commercial districts and manufacturing districts to still situate those and have a last mile issue. I don't think it necessarily changes the situation by throwing them in these other retail districts. The only other question I had was, is it that the UPS stores that do operate today, they're considered retail? Is that what it is? Or what are they classified if you go to the DOB today?
It's because what they operate under is their retail because they sell, boxes, tapes, and the portion that they actually put the packages in is less, so it's considered an accessory.
Okay.
Yeah, and to your point on last mile distribution, I think there's maybe two problems with distribution. One being where these like larger facilities are,
Sure.
and then where the packages actually get delivered to. And we're hoping that although, last mile is a huge all-encompassing kind of issue, that this helps to alleviate at least the getting the package delivered to you part of that issue.
And I don't disagree with you.
I don't mean to interrupt. We do have to move on.
Okay.
I'm just trying to solicit conditions. That's why I asked.
Yeah, no, I get it.
So,
Was that limiting then the micro distribution to just C4 districts and eliminating the expansion into C1, C2? Is that what you were saying, Craig?
I mean, if
That's good.
yeah, that's fine for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay,
Can we
That works.
right,
so
so,
bring up the C2 versus C4 map so that
You
we can
have no
understand what that is? Because do you think there's a big difference between delivering something one-ish mile on a bike and delivering things, potentially 4 miles on a bike?
Right.
Right, so here's your C2s. These are the one, here's your C2s, these are the ones that would be allowed up to 2,500 square feet. And C4s, you have, oh, you do have C4s, I stand corrected. So you do have a little bit of the C4 areas that are more of the destination, commercial, but they could be up to 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, because I mean, the packages to get to these locations have to come from somewhere, and they're coming from the bigger distribution centers, and they're coming on trucks, right? So we're just bringing more trucks into the C1, C2, but if we do have opportunities for these other districts that maybe we can orient it there, that's a suggestion.
I don't want to.
do you have a suggestion for a condition? Otherwise, I'm not taking.
I
any other
am,
discussion.
it's a counterpoint to not have that condition. The whole point of last mile is to make it easier and to get the packages to people faster without needing all of this extra traffic. If we're putting it to C4s, you're necessitating extra traffic. There are very few locations. I don't think we need that.
Well, I mean, what to his point is that you're reducing the amount of traffic to 1, 2, 3 areas. And if you go back to C2, if you wouldn't mind, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you're getting larger trucks to 7 areas versus 3.
But it's a feasibility issue too. It's a lot easier potentially as someone who bikes
Of
everywhere.
course, I don't argue with that.
Yeah.
Of course. It's just a matter of, we already have a trucking problem.
Here's a condition. Why don't we approve it as proposed, except only for pickup? That way everyone, like I can go pick up my stuff at a local store. It still brings in a truck to that store, I understand, but that store is already probably getting a truck anyway.
Then you kill the traffic.
And at least that way.
But isn't it bikes theoretically that are going after it goes to the store? Like just
I've
just
never-
trying to, that was my understanding.
No idea if it's required.
I don't, it could be any kind of smaller transportation, motorized bikes, regular bicycles, pedicabs. It could be a whole bunch of things. I mean,
Another truck.
it works better in Manhattan than it
Another
does
truck
here.
going
because-
micro to micro to micro, and then
And that's a good point. Like it could be another truck. We don't have regulation over that. We're working with DOT. But what's happening right now is I'm a small business. I want to deliver something. The only opportunity is for me to use UPS or FedEx, which is coming with a big truck. Right.
All right, so, the approves, the supports had it, okay? So now we have a motion for limiting micro distribution to C4. Does anyone, second that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. Anyone abstain? Okay, so then, we cannot have any more discussion on this. I really apologize. We have to move on.
I propose a second condition.
Maybe we'll revisit it if it's not 9:30 tonight, because we're moving on. I apologize. And I'm very strictly putting the discussion to 7 minutes going forward. Otherwise, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. Commercial campus. We don't have, campus commercial. We don't have any, yes?
We might. Could you please tell me if, because this came from a board member, that campus might actually apply to our congregate housing such as our supportive housing, Morris Manor, 97 Crook? Is that also campus housing? It's not just NYCHA, correct?
It's not just NYCHA. There are, there
The
is.
21 Duryea Place, 97 Crook Avenue, and Morris Manor.
Yeah, it's based on size. I can already go through conditions, being large scale development that has to be of an area at least 1.5 acres, 2 or more continuous zoning lots that could be separated by a street, and does not exceed the size. Yeah, that's for the size of the large campus.
Okay, then I think we don't. 97 Crook isn't 1.5
It doesn't,
acres.
no, and it doesn't cross over a street either.
Says that.
Wow. So we don't have any. Just want to see something from the notes. The only, again, the only thing I want to say, and I just want to say this in light of the lunch and learn that we had earlier today, you know, I think we won't take a position on it, but I think it's important for DOT to, I'm sorry, for DCP to make some adjustments as to what kind of businesses can be on campus. I think there's an equity issue. I think there's a food security issue. I think that it shouldn't be free reign, and that there should definitely be tax incentives like the Fresh program that are driving what goes on these campuses. And that's all I'll say about that. If you wouldn't mind allowing us just to editorialize on, you know, these inequities that we find. And does anyone oppose us opining in our statement, but we'll take no position? Okay,
So basically neither confirm nor deny with that condition.
right, so
Mission impossible.
we're not supporting or not supporting because we don't have it in the district right now. Okay, thanks. Moving on to the next one.
Next proposal.
Corner
16.
stores, 16.
Yeah, one more.
So, yeah. Oh, it's like a funny one.
Okay, so this one is one of those that is not limited to commercial overlays or commercial districts. In fact, what's being proposed here is already allowed there. So there are certain parts of the city where I'm sure you may have seen them in CB14 or elsewhere, where there are old commercial facilities, old corner stores that are grandfathered in past or from before 1961 that still serve a very valid purpose. You may be located really far away from a commercial district or for a commercial overlay. You want to pick up a quick sandwich or a couple slices of cheese, I don't know, whatever. So we want to make it possible for some of these to open up with very high barriers to entry, actually, just because we have had a couple of folks in neighborhoods say, we would really like something like this, because right now, if I just want to go to the corner store, pick something up, that would take me 8 blocks away or something like that. Remember, this citywide, that includes Staten Island, for instance. So what we want to do is allow a corner store of some sort to be permitted under the following conditions. A CPC authorization, which is discretionary. Again, it would come to the community boards, right? They would have to be under 2,500 square feet. They had to be within 100 feet of an intersection, so at an intersection, basically. They would have to go to the environment, they'd have to go through an environmental review, which is not cheap. And they would only be able to be approved by CPC if the CPC makes certain findings. Those findings are such that it will not have a significant nuisance in terms of traffic, in terms of noise, and anything else like that. So when it goes to the community board, in these very, quite frankly, I think, situations, when it goes to the community board, you will have the opportunity to opine and say, no, because of X, Y, and Z, we think that that would introduce additional traffic, it would introduce additional noise or nuisances. And the CPC would have to take that into account. Oh, sorry.
And if I may, it includes they serve the surrounding residential area, not create traffic congestion, not produce any objectable effects, and not alter the essential character of a neighborhood in which a building would be located. They have to prove those findings to the commission.
All right, 7 minutes on the clock.
I say that we can be in support of it as long as it's strictly a food supply, like a grocery store, not like a corner store that sells cannabis or something like that.
Well, it sounds like this is gonna be a pretty lengthy process and expensive for this to go through. So it's not, if someone's gonna put in a corner store, the thing about bodegas and corner stores, and I have a whole spiel here that I'm not gonna read you, but I'll email it to you. Because they were studied, and the barriers is that there's not enough refrigeration, there's not enough paid SKU placement, and not enough foot traffic for fresh things. But it doesn't sound like, based on the amount of work that has to be put in by the applicant, that these are gonna be barriers, right? Because they're gonna be expensive markets, but they're gonna be local. Did I answer kind of like, did I have a good conversation for you about that? 'Cause I agree.
Okay.
Yes. I do think that the barrier to entry is gonna overcome some of these issues, and we're not gonna have a cannabis shop in a corner store. It's food.
Why not? It just is.
I don't.
I mean, you could, so I mean, part of, if I may clarify if I may clarify your thinking, right? This is not limited to food. That is true. However, the environmental review, which again is not cheap, needs to be done before it even goes to the CPC. What we really think is most likely to occur is something where this is something that's desired by the community already. It is possible that I, as a business owner, will say, screw it, I'll take my chances. Go through a long environmental review, go to the community board, and I would say I'm gonna open a weed shop or something, right? And say, hey, what do you think about this? And you'll say, we don't like it, and then say, whatever, I'm gonna take my chances, and then go to the CPC. It's possible. It is possible. We don't think that it's likely because those barriers, both financially and legally, are very, very high.
And the CPC will review the findings as well and say, did you speak, part of this is essential character of the neighborhood. What is your excuse to be able to have this business in this area? And ultimately, the CPC votes on if this is approved or not. And so with the set of findings, we strongly believe that they'd have to get community approval and be a service to the community to be able to go through this process.
Yes.
It says community board approval, just to be clear, is that a recommendation or an actual approval? Like, could a community board say no and it would just not move forward?
We're only advisory. We only make recommendations on everything
I see.
and everything. Tonight, that's all this is.
So okay, it's recommended.
Liz?
Can I guess one thing I don't understand is why is the traffic congestion condition for like the environmental related study. It seems to me like the kind of businesses you're targeting here should never create traffic congestion. Like if you're making like a bodega or a local market or something like that, should be something that is improving the walkability of areas that don't have that in current things. Is that a way to try to legislate what the use type is, or is that just like kind of the default text for it? Because it seems like an extra burden for a step here that doesn't look like it would apply for on the corner store, right?
It's to cover all of the bases, right? It's to make sure that if there's something, right, some unintended consequence or something that we didn't foresee here, that, okay, we don't think, we agree with you. It's unlikely to create any traffic congestion, but if it doesn't, great, then the condition probably won't be a big issue in these circumstances. And if somehow the CPC or the board, tells the CPC, oh my God, you guys don't really know, this area will have traffic congestion because of X, Y, and Z reasons, then it covers additional bases.
Okay. We got 3 minutes. Anything, because I would love to get a vote on this. All those in support of this? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11. Opposed? Anybody abstain? I think we got everybody. Okay, any conditions in 3 minutes? I'm opposed because I think the most important thing is that we have access to food. Although I think it would be great to have a corner cannabis shop too. But I think I'm a dietitian. I want food. I want to be able to walk from my house 2 blocks to pick up milk and butter because
That's more important.
it's more important. So
We add a condition that we encourage, like maybe there's something like the fresh zone or something that could be added to this, because I think that's what a lot of us are looking for.
if you allow me to craft something beautiful from the study that I cited in my notes, I will. Tell you so. And so the condition, I propose that the condition be prioritized to foods,
Like
fresh
review
food and produce or,
Yeah, not a.
the applicability of the fresh zoning text amendment to these locations.
yes.
Second.
Not a racket.
All those in favor?
Future roads.
I'm in favor of that.
Hey, geez, you're ruining
I just
Great.
hate them myself. Okay. so
All right, everybody. Next
do
one,
it for fun.
Okay, 17.
17, better waiver process.
We are expanding the toolkit so businesses can initiate a process where some zoning rules on a case-by-case basis and can waive rules on a case-by-case basis and standardize a process in doing so with the CPC authorization, which can be voted on by the CPC. There's a lot of different things that zoning regulates in terms of bulk, parking requirements, things like that. And being able to have a rationalized process, to standardize a process, to being able to waive some of the zoning rules on a case-by-case basis. I'm happy to come up with examples. I have examples that make sense.
What are the zoning applications? Which is this for all commercial? and-
We've almost none.
Yeah,
Very little.
Right. So
Which zones are we talking about?
So
There's the M.
it's technically kind of, yeah, this is everything. It's like, keep going. Right, so like, doesn't matter in C1s, keep going. Doesn't matter in C2s. C4s also doesn't matter. C5, 6, Rs, and then I think it's M. for the old
yeah.
one. Yeah, so here
It's
and there is when this would apply.
And that one already is in soundstage,
mhm.
so. The guiding light.
And nobody's trying to do anything on McDonald Avenue.
Questions?
So my question is, when I just reading that description real quick, it felt like a plot twist where it's like, hey, now that you got this far, here's a way for you to follow a process to do something outside of what already exists. So I apologize for seeing it that way the first time. And so I guess what I could use some clarity on is what is the intent of this? And am I reading this the wrong way?
I think maybe it'll be helpful if I share an example. So for example, like one of the rules that zoning governs is bulk and height and things like that. So sometimes a business might need 5 extra feet to their first floor height in order to have a business operate successfully. And in order to do that process, we're recommending a standardized process that goes through not all processes go through the same kind of CPC voting or review, but we're expanding it so that the process is standardized. You know what you're going to get into if you want to propose something like that, and you go through CPC, do the process, of course, go to community boards to be able to have that one part of zoning maybe be changed a little to fit the needs of your business.
Gotcha. Thank you for that example.
Yes.
Yeah, so just to boil it down, so it doesn't change anything regarding the use, it just changes the ability to modify existing buildings towards those uses. Is that essentially what it is? Like to be able to be more flexible, to be able to reuse existing buildings?
I'd say top line, yes.
Oh, and it wouldn't change FAR or anything?
No.
So just the shell is still there?
Yeah.
The only one I don't.
What about new construction for a soundstage?
I think, it depends on what they're proposing. I think if a soundstage, has a specific zoning district that they want to rezone to, this wouldn't apply to them. I'm sorry, could you explain a little bit further for sound stages?
So let's say, the old NBC studio on Avenue M, which was a soap opera, which is a very small stage. There are other manufacturing lots around it. Let's say that somebody wanted to build a stage in that area and wanted to encompass those other lots and build a bigger building. That's what I'm asking. So how does this apply to that? Or doesn't it?
So this would be if that said soundstage realized they needed 5 extra feet on their first floor to operate, they would go through this process for review. That there might be a lot of other things that they would need to change in order to make their business viable. This is for those small pieces that we just need to change in order for businesses to make sense that maybe that zoning doesn't necessarily always consider.
So this is just for existing things.
I think this could be for new things as well.
But like when the King's Theater had to expand their backstage because loading in for live performance was different than when it was a movie theater. That's not in the right zone for this, but that would be an example of a change of business had to make.
And a standardized process then to even be able to start the conversation on being able to adapt.
Okay. Any other questions? It feels very straightforward. No? Okay. Those in support? That was unanimous. Oh, no. Those opposed?
No, I'm gonna abstain on this. It's just
Gotta get it.
things off.
Money in Vegas part.
Night's about to end. and Mike's hesitancy. Last one, number 18. Focus on the prize.
All right, we've made it here. Okay. 7 minutes on the clock. All right, so we have 3 zones, M1s, M2s, and M3s for manufacturing. Manufacturing has changed a lot over the years, and the context in which these zones are located has also changed a lot over the years, right? Manufacturing, I think when we hear that, at least when I hear it, in myself, I think of smokestacks and industrial buildings and things like that. Whereas manufacturing today has different demands, different needs, and often provides very little, if any, very few, if any, nuisances. You think of computer chip, manufacturing or t-shirt printing, sometimes, stuff like that. We do not have enough tools currently to address the different situations and to address the contexts in which they should exist, right? So we've got, M1s or I'll just even take it out of that. Our manufacturing districts, a lot of times you either have the option of having something that requires a whole lot of parking and these low slung buildings, something that you see on the left side with zoning, or you have something that allows a 10 FAR building, which is really, really big and also has requirements that are a little bit antiquated and outdated. There's very few, options that you have in between those. We've been working on different opportunities, the IBIA program, which some of you may be familiar with, of actually bringing some of these buildings into more of a loft style building that makes sense in a lot of different neighborhoods. Sometimes that works. We're still kind of analyzing how well and how efficient that is being. And so what we want to do is create new end zones that will not be mapped as a result of this. All we're doing is expanding the menu that someone in theory could choose if they wanted to go through a rezoning, right? If I want to rezone an M district now, I have a very limited view of options, and sometimes none of those options really make sense for the neighborhoods. We got to pick the least worst one. We don't want to have to do that anymore, right? And so these new districts would make more sense and have different options for different districts that don't have onerous yard or loading or parking requirements, because, you know, new industrial is different than old industrial, and don't often match the historical context of the neighborhood, right? There are certain situations, and you'll see them in the MX districts in Williamsburg, for instance. That's a good example, where you'll go from like a commercial or residential district to a manufacturing district and kind of not be able to tell the difference, because they've kind of all got those like loft style buildings that we think still add to the streetscape and don't have those extra nuisances. If either of you want to add anything, feel free.
Could you go to the next slide? I don't know if it's, yeah, here.
Ah.
Here are the different options in terms of zoning districts that'll be added to the toolbox. So what's core is what we would consider preservation of industrial uses. This would be mapped in areas that are, you know, M3, that are heavier industrial. Again, none of these are being mapped. These are just options. Transition would be a balance between industrial and maybe commercial. And then growth is where it would be really close to residential areas where we wouldn't want something that would produce a lot of environmental impacts really close to residences. And then there's a C7 as well. That's a new commercial district. Have to talk more about that.
Yeah, and so that's also important. We've had a lot of discussions with council members and other legislators and neighborhoods about current M districts allow manufacturing, of course, industrial uses. They also allow commercial, right, explicitly. That will still be the case, but you can see the incentivizations in different places, right? We want to have limitations on non-industrial uses so that we can preserve a lot of those industrial jobs in some of the core districts. You'll have an incentivized like, you know, incentives are different than limitations and what they're trying to do in those transition districts, and then a little bit more flexibility in the M1s.
And the new type of commercial district, right? Where would that be most prevalent?
So currently, they're not being matched. They could be mapped in, you know, areas with M1. It would be strictly commercial FARs. There wouldn't be housing in this type of tool. It's repurposing an existing C7 district to be able to follow the FAR. I'm happy to also read out the FAR distributions too of an M1A.
So in any of our M districts, the two of them could be transformed into a C7
After a rezoning.
after a rezone.
Yeah.
So this doesn't do it. It would go
Doesn't do
through
it.
the ULR process?
Yeah.
Okay,
And it would just hopefully create tools that maybe better suit.
okay. Go. Yes.
I guess one question I have is what is DCP or the idea of where like these core districts would be put? Because I think one of the things that I've really noticed around like looking at rezonings across the city is that a lot of the neighborhood rezonings are looking towards M districts to create new housing to not displace current residents, and figuring out ways to create that housing alongside manufacturing districts. And right now, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, M3A is kind of what we already have for manufacturing. Is that correct? Or would there be any allotment here to try to, you know, allow for a little more density so that a business isn't, you know, pushed off to not sell, but they could perhaps consolidate onto one smaller lot or get another tenant that would be able to do manufacturing there, as opposed to, you know, I think, you know, ideally we would be able to solve all these crises in one place and not lose anyone from, you know, where they are with more of the higher density options. But I just wanted to get a better understanding of that.
Yeah, I'm going to try to rapid fire answer those questions. A really, really great point. A lot of our M districts we are looking at for housing, there are IBZs in which housing is not permitted currently. Those are typically where M3As are mapped because of just how manufacturing it is there. They're typically, I think, maybe only mapped in IBZs. Don't quote me on that. But in terms of other questions you've had, sorry.
Oh, just I guess I just wanted to understand where the M3As like in DCPs, like we've, you know, 50 years from now, where would they kind of still be versus like these new options that hopefully would allow us to get more manufacturing uses for more jobs, but also potentially allow for more housing to lessen the housing affordability crisis.
And you said another really great point in that for the M3 districts, there are very minimal FAR abilities with the M3. So a lot of heavy manufacturing businesses that are pretty limited today to where they can locate, can expand, like you said, and maybe stay where they're needed or want to be. And so this is an option to then be able to have higher FAR for M3 districts in areas like IBZs that don't have.
Okay, so just to try to summarize this rapid fire, M3A and keeping a lot of the manufacturing only IBZs, and then everything else is the goal would hopefully to be able to give options to create more mixed uses and more dense manufacturing and potentially more housing in other places.
Yes, all of the above.
Okay, great.
Great.
Thank you.
Next question.
I don't know what any of that means, but.
All right.
No.
Yeah.
Strict time.
I know we're punchy. Let's get this.
Letters, bro. This is fine.
It seems like there's been some pushback from like the Vidcos or Evergreens and the Swiftics about wanting to protect those industrial forests. So what is it that they're asking in order to ensure they're maintaining industrial business improvement districts?
Their argument really is, or I should say, they're highlighting really the core areas and maybe some of these other ones as well, but they're mainly targeting core in terms of really limiting commercial uses even further than what we're proposed here. That's what they're proposing. We think that this is the right balance to make sure that, it's still viable to build, to have the right mix of commercial and manufacturing, but of course respect their professional opinion as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, let's go to a vote on this. Those in support? 1, 2, 3. Anyone opposed? Those abstaining? Great.
He's sitting on the. And
Okay. This, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up this public hearing and then we'll ratify everything as the committee of the whole, okay? Thanks. This public hearing for Community Board 14 is adjourned at 9:02 p.m. So based on the findings of which you were all here for of the public hearing, do I have a motion to accept the votes for support, the votes for do not support, and all conditions that were motioned and duly approved in the public hearing?
So moved.
Okay, all those in
Second.
favor?
Here we go.
All those opposed? Anyone object? What? All right, so I want to thank you all, super dedication to get this done. The committee of the whole, this decision here tonight will be binding as per the, decision at the general board meeting to empower this committee. And we will write up and submit our comments as so selected. Thank you. This meeting of the committee of the whole is adjourned at 9:03 p.m.
Sean, what's your question? You reviewed the portal. You didn't send us all the other community boards who voted.
I feel things are
About like conditional.
Well, with not that other half. Great. And that's just like voting on, right?
Favorable. Yeah, I think only one.
Favorable. Just teams.
And the condition.
It was good after were required is that the micro distribution that from the micro distribution can't be by. Because that, I think that was kind of small. I assume that you would be more friendly to that.
Just trying to do it earlier today.
I don't have like, like that are just extra, right?
The first city. Yeah. And I couldn't find the link fast enough there.
Yeah.
Fascinating thing.
But I will say, I.
Forget what else is happening.
Laptop and for whatever reason.
You want to go pick it up?
I would love to go pick it up, but like if I get a Mac, I can do that easily by going to an Apple store. And if I get like a Dell or a Lenovo or whatever, like I have to trust a random bodega to accept it on my behalf. And like love bodegas, but that's not quite the same as like a nice yes or whatever, right?
That's true.
Yes, you did.
Of course. Okay.